There is a massive, fundamentally flawed assumption running through the entire reality creation space, and it is responsible for an immense amount of frustration. You hear it constantly from certain teachers and speakers. They sit there on a stage or in front of a camera and tell you that manifesting is effortless. They tell you that all you have to do is sit quietly, visualize your desire in perfect detail, hold the feeling, and it will flawlessly appear. But when they say that, they are speaking from a place of profound neurological arrogance. They are operating under the completely unscientific, unexamined assumption that every single human being possesses the exact same biological hardware. They are assuming we all run the exact same operating system. But we are not all neurotypical. The brain is the physical rendering engine that sits between the pure quantum code of Framework 2 and the dense material reality of Framework 1. And if you are neurodivergent, if you have an ADHD brain, an autistic nervous system, or a hyper-vigilant sensory processing style, the standard neurotypical advice is not only entirely useless, it is actively maddening. If we are going to treat reality as a rendered experience, we have to talk about how different brains process the master code. Because the hive mind loves a one-size-fits-all formula, but the universe operates on deep, localized specificity. Let's break down the actual neurological variants that completely change how a sovereign observer interacts with reality, starting with the visualization spectrum. The standard teaching heavily relies on seeing the end result in your mind's eye, but the visual rendering capabilities of the human brain exist on a massive, highly varied spectrum. On one end, you have aphantasia. For an architect with an aphantasic brain, the internal holodeck is visually pitch black. They cannot close their eyes and see an apple, let alone a complex multi-step bridge of incidents. If they listen to mainstream advice and try to force a visualization, they will fail, hit massive resistance, and assume the laws of reality don't work for them. But their brain isn't broken. It simply codes reality differently. Their advantage is that they often have highly tuned conceptual or spatial awareness. They program Framework 2 not through pictures, but through pure, formless, absolute knowing. On the exact opposite end is hyperphantasia, where the brain possesses a photorealistic, multisensory imagination. Their internal holodeck is so vivid that it can actually confuse the central nervous system into thinking the event is happening in the physical 3D world right now. For them, the challenge isn't rendering the code, it is detaching from the overwhelming sensory input of that internal world enough to actually function and take inspired action in the external one. Then you have sensory processing sensitivity, or what is clinically observed in highly sensitive persons. Roughly 20% of human brains are biologically wired to process subtle environmental and energetic data far more deeply than the average brain. These individuals possess the most accurate somatic compass on the planet. They can literally feel the friction of a dead timeline or the lightness of the tau in their chest. But because their receptors are so wide open, they are highly susceptible to taking on the scarcity anchor of the hive mind. They absorb the heavy frequencies of crowded rooms, global news cycles, or frantic environments. To successfully code reality, they cannot just visualize, they must master ruthless energetic shielding, or their nervous system simply shorts out from data overload. We even see this variance in how the brain routes data, like with synesthesia, where sensory pathways are cross-wired. A person might see, sound, or taste colors. When playing a guitar, the fretboard might light up in a spectrum of colors in the mind's eye, not as a physical hallucination, but as an internal state of frequency translating directly into visual data. If the human brain can cross-wire sensory input to hear a color, then the idea that there is only one correct neurotypical way to impress Framework 2 is mathematically absurd. You must use whatever sensory pathway your specific brain is naturally wired to amplify. And we cannot have this conversation without addressing the trauma-altered architecture, the hyper-vigilant default mode network. The spiritual community often toxically labels this as just having a low vibration, which is scientifically illiterate. A brain that has experienced prolonged stress has an enlarged amygdala. Its primary mechanical objective is scanning the horizon for danger. For this brain, the bouncer at the door of the subconscious is heavily armed, and the scarcity anchor is bolted to the floor. When they try to blindly assume a state of abundance, their DMN violently rejects the code because it feels unfamiliar. And to the primitive brain, unfamiliar equals dangerous. These architects cannot simply think positive. They have to manually hack their biology through somatic regulation using breathwork or vagus nerve stimulation to physically convince the nervous system that it is safe to let the heavy wheel of reality spin. When you understand these variants, you start to see why navigating reality requires a custom approach. Look at the ADHD operating system. For an ADHD mind, the executive function and the default mode network do not operate on a quite predictable rhythm. The mind is hyperactive, highly distractible, and deeply sensitive to external stimuli. If you tell an ADHD brain to sit down in a silent room, close its eyes, and hold a singular thought for 20 minutes, the friction is immediate. The brain rebels. The network floods the system with noise. For some people, calming that network requires a stimulant. For others, it might be a specific type of food or a repetitive physical action just to occupy the nervous system enough to let the consciousness slip past the bouncer. This is where the ancient technology of organic compounds like psilocybin enters the conversation, not as some mystical magic trick, but as a highly precise biological tool. Humanity has used these compounds for thousands of years to deliberately shift consciousness, and we are finally understanding the clinical mechanics behind it. It acts as a chemical override on a neurological firewall. When a specific dose is utilized within an hour, the physical environment of Framework 1 begins to shift. The density of the physical body feels suddenly lighter. That is the exact biofeedback signaling that the bouncer has stepped away from the door. That is the cue to enter the holodeck. But the intention you set right before entering that state is critical. It is not a wish to the universe. It is a direct line of code you are programming into your conscious mind to guide the render. When you set the intention for a massive abundance shift, you are telling the system exactly which scene you are about to occupy. And you do not need perfect 4K vision to do this. When I close my eyes, my internal vision goes dark. But because the pineal gland is clear, the other senses take over. I don't instantly see a pristine movie. I bypass the visual requirement entirely and go straight to the somatic truth. I can place myself perfectly in my back garden. I can sense the weight of the environment, the texture of the air, the profound spatial awareness of absolute financial sovereignty, and the physical presence of others acknowledging that massive shift. Every single one of my other senses activates, reading the exact vibration and frequency of that moment. It is not a daydream. It is not a meditation. Mechanically, quantumly, it happens. You occupy that state so fully that your central nervous system registers it as a crystallized biological memory. Your body believes it happened yesterday. But here is the most critical part of this entire mechanic, and it is the piece almost no one talks about when dealing with the latency of the physical world. You can have the most profound, perfectly rendered wave collapse in Framework 2. You can know with absolute, unshakable certainty that the code is locked. But if you have a highly sensitive or neurodivergent nervous system, Framework 1 is exceptionally loud. The outside world is dense, it is heavy, and it constantly demands your attention. Days or weeks after that perfect internal rendering, you might hit a wall. The friction of the 3D grid starts grinding against your awareness. The external environment gets too aggressive, the notifications ping, the hive mind demands compliance, and suddenly you feel yourself reverting. You feel that old scarcity anchor trying to sink its hooks back into your biology. Your default mode network reboots, the bouncer wakes up, and the system tries to drag you back into the dead timeline. A neurotypical brain might be able to casually brush that off. But for a hypersensitive nervous system, you have to be radically proactive. You cannot just do the internal work once and assume the firewall will stay down forever. You have to recognize the exact moment you are becoming detached from the state of the wish fulfilled. The second the outside world becomes too heavy, you have to realize that the bouncer has returned. You need to break down the network again. Whether you use breathwork, deep meditation, or an organic compound, you have to view these things as what they truly are. Warp pipes in a video game. They are tools designed to help you bypass the dense, heavy grinding of a low-level stage and jump your consciousness directly back to the higher state you previously secured. You might find that you need to take that jump more frequently than someone else to maintain your frequency. You might need to break down the DMN more often to keep the bouncer asleep, while the physical world catches up to the code you installed. And that is perfectly fine. That is the architecture of your specific game. Manifestation is not a rigid, black and white neurotypical formula. It is a highly fluid, deeply personal mastery of your own unique neurological hardware. Once you stop trying to force your brain to act like someone else's and start using the exact tools, sensory pathways, and overrides that work for your specific nervous system, the struggle disappears. You stop fighting the bouncer, you step cleanly into the holodeck, and you let your own uncorrupted code rewrite the world. But even when you understand your neurological baseline, you cannot stop there because the brain is a biological organ and it is entirely subject to the variables of its physical environment. The hardware itself can be corrupted. We talk about different brain types as if they are static, but within those types are massive fluctuating variables. Take the concept of aphantasia, for example. A person might assume they have aphantasia because when they close their eyes, their internal holodeck is entirely pitch black. But in many cases, it isn't true aphantasia. It is a severely calcified pineal gland. You might inherently possess the ability to render highly detailed, multisensory visions in your mind, but your physical antenna is completely blocked by the density of what you are feeding your biological vessel. The nervous system reacts violently to the inputs of the 3D grid. If your body is bogged down by highly processed foods, tap water loaded with fluoride and heavy metals, synthetic chemicals, or heavy pharmaceutical medications, your rendering engine gets clogged. You cannot expect to broadcast a pure, unresisted frequency into framework 2 if your physical interface is corrupted by low integrity inputs. This is why shifting to clean, organic, plant-based nutrition, sourcing pure water, and prioritizing high-quality inputs down to the level of using oils stored in glass rather than hormone-disrupting plastics isn't just a lifestyle choice. It is reality architecture maintenance. It decalcifies the pineal gland. And the toxins are not just physical, they are vibrational. If you are constantly allowing outside interference to program your mind, listening to the fear-mongering of governments, obsessing over the global news cycle, or allowing the hive mind to dictate your internal state, you are willingly injecting malware into your own operating system. Before you can truly understand what kind of brain you have to clean the vessel. You have to shut off the external noise and see what your hardware is actually capable of when it isn't suffocating. This requires an uncompromising level of self-awareness, especially for those navigating intersecting neurodivergent systems. Consider the profound complexity of a combined ADHD and autistic nervous system. It is a double whammy of sensory processing. When these two systems are constantly attempting to regulate the overwhelming data of the outside world, the physical body breaks down. This crash is often dangerously misdiagnosed or misunderstood by the individual as depression. But it isn't depression. It is massive, systematic burnout. You have been hyperactive, forcing your energy into the 3D grid, masking your natural state to survive the hive mind, and your biological battery has simply died. And here is the danger. It is exactly during these periods of severe burnout that the default mode network takes back over. When you have no energy left to hold the frequency of your desired state, you revert. The scarcity anchor drops, the bouncer locks down the subconscious, and you slide right back into the dead timeline. Neville Goddard spoke constantly about the power of awareness. This doesn't just mean being aware of your thoughts, it means being ruthlessly aware of your biological battery. You have to know when your nervous system is hitting burnout so you can pull back, shut out the 3D world, and execute a system override before you lose your momentum. This brings us to the precise, varied mechanics of using organic technology like psilocybin to execute that override. Because we are dealing with unique biological hardware, the dosage is a highly specific variable. There is a massive misconception that to break down the DMN, you need a heroic dose. But for a highly active, neurodivergent mind, precision is everything. For some, a micro to macro threshold dose, like 0.7 grams, is the exact perfect sweet spot. It is just enough to quiet the bouncer, lighten the density of the physical body, and allow the conscious mind to step cleanly into the holodeck and set a direct intention for the reality they want to render. But if you push that variable too far, if you take 1.5 grams, 3 grams, or 7 grams, you blow right past the holodeck. For an ADHD brain, a heavy dose doesn't lock you into your desired manifestation. It blasts your awareness so far past the DMN that you lose the intention entirely. You stop architecting your reality and instead find yourself interacting with other entities and exploring entirely different dimensional constructs. While profound, it completely derails the mechanical goal of impressing Framework 2 with a specific desire. Yet, for someone else With a deeply rigid, heavily armored, neurotypical brain, it might take 5 grams just to crack their firewall open enough to set an intention. The variance is massive. This is why the ultimate rule of organic technology is to start small. You do not just leap into the deep end of the quantum field. You test your hardware. You start with 0.1, 0.2, or maybe zero point 0.5 grams in a cup of tea. You observe the feedback. You locate the exact threshold where your specific DMN powers down, but your sovereign awareness remains in the driver's seat. You must become the absolute master of your own vessel, because the environment we are navigating is not what we were taught. We are not just biological accidents spinning on a random planet in a dead universe. We are operating on a plane. This is a highly responsive, multidimensional realm. It is a profound, interactive, holographic projection rendered perfectly by the interplay between your localized neurological hardware and the infinite wave potential of Framework 2. When you clear the toxins, decode your specific nervous system, and learn exactly how to dial in your frequency, you stop being a victim of the hologram and you become its absolute architect. Once you have cleaned the vessel and decoded your specific neurological hardware, you are left with the ultimate question. What exactly are you doing when you finally bypass the bouncer and step into that internal holodeck? Most people in the reality creation space think they are just visualizing. They think they are just playing a game of make-believe in a dark room, hoping the universe takes a hint. But what you are actually doing is executing a highly calculated phase shift in your consciousness. You are initiating a quantum jump. To understand the mechanics of this, you have to realize that the void, the darkness behind your closed eyes, when the default mode network finally shuts down, is not empty space. It is a highly structured, multi-dimensional interface. It operates in distinct, measurable levels of focus. When you first power down the 3D grid, whether through the precise use of organic compounds, breathwork, or sheer biological exhaustion, you enter the threshold. This is the precise state where the physical body becomes incredibly dense, numb, or seemingly paralyzed, while the conscious mind remains razor-sharp, untethered, and entirely awake. Ancient mystics referred to this as the state akin to sleep. In advanced metaphysical practices, it is recognized as the foundational focus level required to safely leave the physical anchor behind. Your biology is asleep, but your sovereign awareness is fully online in Framework 2. It is from this exact launchpad that the true architecture happens. In this state, you must completely discard the concept of attracting things. The law of attraction is a primitive 3D limitation because it implies distance, separation, and time. It implies that you are here and your jackpot, your freedom, or your new life is way over there, and you have to magnetically drag it to your door. On this holographic plane, nothing is separate. Every single variation of reality already exists simultaneously in the quantum field. You do not pull a new reality toward you. You jump your consciousness directly into the coordinate where it already is. Think of your awareness like an analog frequency. When you want to watch a different broadcast on a heavy vintage television set, you don't drag the new program through the physical air and force it into the machine. You simply turn the dial. You tune the internal receiver to a completely different channel, and the physical rendering on the glass screen organically changes to match the new signal. When you occupy the state of the wish fulfilled using your specific sensory pathways, when you feel the weight, the spatial awareness, and the absolute certainty of that new reality, you are turning the internal dial. You are tuning your localized consciousness to a completely parallel coordinate. When your nervous system fully accepts that new frequency as the absolute truth, the quantum jump is complete. The internal loop is closed. When you open your eyes and return your awareness to the dense physical body, the external world might have a brief latency period, but the broadcast has fundamentally changed. The old reality has lost its power source, and your uncorrupted code is already bleeding through the screen. Because once you truly grasp this, once you understand that you are not attracting a distant reality, but simply tuning your internal dial to a coordinate that already exists, the entire game changes. You stop fighting the 3D mirror. You stop looking at the dense, heavy reality of Framework 1 and begging it to change. You realize that the external world is nothing but a delayed echo of the code you installed yesterday. It is just the latency period. The massive stone wheel is spinning, and your only job is to not get in its way. This is why you must ruthlessly protect your holodeck. You must protect your biological hardware. Stop letting the cheap digital wave collapses of your smartphone drain your energetic momentum. Stop letting the hive mind dictate what your specific, unique nervous system should feel like. Whether your internal vision is visually pitch black, whether you need to use organic tools to bypass a hyper-vigilant default mode network, or whether your somatic compass is so highly tuned that you instantly feel the heavy friction of a dead timeline, your hardware is perfect for you. You just have to learn how to drive it. The bridge of incidence is already building itself under your feet. You do not need to micromanage the particles or force the physical outcome. You simply have to hold the frequency, maintain the lightness of actionless action, and let the flawless mechanics of the universe render exactly what you commanded in the dark. This is what it means to step out of the matrix of chance. This is what it means to become the sovereign observer. If you are ready to stop fighting the shadow and start architecting the light, you are in the right place. We are building an archive of absolute sovereignty here, decoding the mechanics of reality layer by layer, bypassing the superficial advice, and getting straight to the master code. If this resonated with you, hit the subscribe or follow button and join the archive, and drop a comment below and let me know how you are tuning your own dial this week. What old, heavy 3D dynamics are you finally dropping? And what new code are you stepping into? Stay aware of your battery, master your hardware, and hold the line through the latency. I will see you in the next one.